Once again, we travel across Spain to meet a medical translator. Our destination, Fuentidueña del Tajo, home of one of the best translators we've ever met, Emma Goldsmith.
Well, it didn't happen overnight. It was all a gradual process and it wasn't planned. I didn't set out at the age of 18 thinking I'm going to be a nurse and then a musician and then a translator. I'd been toying with the idea of playing the violin professionally when I was younger. And then we did some work experience when I was about 16 and I was more or less allocated to go to a local hospital to try to see what that was like. And I really enjoyed that, so I really thought that nursing would be an interesting thing for me to do. So I trained as a nurse in London. That was a 3-year training. And then at that time I was still playing some music. No Spanish at all at that stage. I had the opportunity to learn Spanish at school and I thought, why would I want to learn Spanish? Why will I ever want to speak Spanish? Little did I know. So then I met my husband-to-be in London and he moved out to Spain. I followed him. And so out here we set up a trio and I played the violin. He played a lot of the South American instruments related to the guitar, mainly the charango. And we played with an Iranian flautist, plus playback, which we did the arrangements for, and we busked. And as a result of our busking in the Retiro, in the Plaza Mayor in Madrid, and various other places, we played in for schools, for different cultural centres, weddings and those sort of places, but mainly we were busking. And so at that time I met other people in Madrid. I made friends with an English woman who was a translator. And she said, you know, why don't you do some translating on the side, you know? And by that time I'd been living in Spain for 2 or 3 years, so my Spanish was reasonable. And there was a real need. There was a real need for native English speakers because at that stage there was no internet. So local Madrid agencies needed people who translated into English. I'd say there's little relation in actual fact. I don't work with music in the background. Usually I find that quite hard to do. Much as I'd love to put on different pieces of music, I find that distracting. I have in the past I did do some translations related to music, so obviously there was a direct relationship there, but since I've been specialised in medicine, I'd say it's fairly unrelated now. Well, I guess it's the same for all translators, that you become so keyed into the meaning of every word. If you hear a new word, you feel you have to go and look it up. Which book would I like to translate? That's kind of so far removed for me, because a medical translator is so sort of specific and technical and not very creative. So there is no book that I would like to have translated.
That's a great answer, actually.
Before it went online, Libro Rojo was only for English to Spanish translators. So I couldn't look up a word in Spanish and find out its English equivalent. So when it went online, this suddenly opened up a new world into English translators. We already had the abbreviations, which have always been a fantastic resource for English translators. And there are so many there that it can seem almost overwhelming, but if you know your field and you can quickly look through the list of all these possible abbreviations, you can quickly rule out the ones that aren't relevant in that context, and it's fairly easy to find the right one. Rarely do you not find that abbreviation in Cosnautas, and if you don't find it, Fernando Navarro's really responsive if you write and you offer that suggestion, which is great. I quite like the idea of, went from its book form, the Libro rojo, that I could sort of, page through just some random words or just land on one or look back a page. And of course you can't do that online, so maybe there'll be some form of having a random word generator or previous words that come above and below that particular one. That could be interesting too. The most difficult thing about medical translation. I think one of the things that you have to adapt to is that you have different sorts of clients. So I work with direct clients who are patients, and so I have to do a lot of hand-holding to help them through the whole process of what a translation is and how I can help them, what they need their translation for, through the whole payment system and invoicing. So that's one sort of client, and then I work with CROs who've got their clinical trials and their methods of working very formalised already, and I have to go with the flow there. And then you work with authors who are hoping to publish their papers, and then you can get quite involved in working on the paper. You are, when you're trying to sort out doubts that you've got from the source text. So I think it's quite hard to work with such a variety of clients. No, I'm pretty adapted, I'd say. So when you said I'll be here at 10 and then you weren't until 10:30, that seemed fairly normal to me. That wasn't a problem. Well, I think my biggest area is sometimes taking on too much work. I'm a bit of a workaholic, and you get used to, over the years, you manage to get a feel for how much you can take on, so you can take on big projects and small ones at the same time and play with the deadlines and slot them into place, and you get a feel of how that's going. I've got a good project management system, so that will do it automatically for me, but sometimes I do take on too much. I started my blog, Signs and Symptoms of Translation, in 2012, and it was really as a result of being very involved in various forums online, and I use Travel Studio a lot, and so I was answering a lot of the same questions again and again, and so it seemed logical to turn these questions into blog posts. So that they could be there, and then I could either link to them or people could arrive there by themselves. So that's how I started it, and at the same time I decided that I was going to have two very specific areas, and I wasn't going to talk about anything that came into my head. So I write posts about medical translation, terminology, regulatory affairs, and SDL Travel Studio, those two. You do have to be careful that when you're reading a blog, it doesn't mean that person is a good translator. That's worth thinking about.
Muy bien. ¿Qué pregunta le haría al próximo traductor? Le preguntaría lo siguiente. Si le parece justificable corregir los textos originales en caso de que sean mejorables. Debemos y podemos, tenemos el deber de mejorar los textos originales cada vez que podamos en nuestras traducciones.
Oh, absolutely. How could we write badly if we've got a bad source text? If there are doubts about what it actually means, then you go back to the client. But yes, we've got a duty to write as well as we possibly can. I'd like to ask the next person whether they're happy with the amount of feedback that they get on their work. Do they work with an editor, with somebody who revises their texts? Do they get feedback from agencies or other people? Do they get enough feedback? I don't know if that really answered the question or not.
I think it